Welcome back to Old Paper Trails. Tonight, we step out of the rain and into the warmth of a grand Victorian library. The year is 1898. The air smells of old paper, leather binding, and beeswax. Let us open the diary of the head archivist and find peace in the silence of the shelves.
November 14th, 1898. The rain began before dawn, a steady drumming rhythm against the cobblestones of London. I arrived at the library at 7:30 a.m., shaking the water from my umbrella before unlocking the heavy oak doors. The key turned in the lock with a satisfying, heavy clunk. Stepping inside, the silence greeted me like an old friend. The air here is different. It is still and heavy with the scent of dust and aging paper. I spent the first hour lighting the gas lamps in the main reading room. The hiss of the gas and the soft pop of the flame were the only sounds in the vast hall. The light cast long, dancing shadows across the rows of mahogany shelves. I cherish this time before the patrons arrive. The books seem to be sleeping, waiting to be woken. November 15th, 1898. The fog is thick today. It presses against the tall windows, turning the world outside into a white blur. I spent the morning in the West Wing, organizing the botany section. I found a misplaced volume on ferns, bound in green cloth with gold lettering. It belongs on the third shelf, not the second. I moved it to its rightful place. Order is the soul of this library. While shelving, I paused to examine a large atlas from 1750. The maps are hand-drawn, the coastlines imperfect but beautiful. I traced the line of a river with my finger, imagining the explorer who first charted it. The paper is thick and creamy, rough to the touch. I dusted the spine carefully with a soft brush before returning it to the shelf. November 16th, 1898. Wednesday, a quiet day. Only 3 visitors came in before noon. One was an elderly gentleman who comes every week to read the newspapers. He does not speak, simply nods at me and takes his seat by the radiator. The library is a refuge for him, as it is for me. I spent the afternoon cataloging a donation of new novels. I wrote the titles into the main ledger: The War of the Worlds, The Turn of the Screw. My pen scratched against the paper, the black ink flowing smoothly. I enjoy the act of writing, the loop of the L, the cross of the T. It is a permanent mark in a fleeting world. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, measuring out the peaceful hours. November 17th, 1898. The rain has returned, heavier than before. It lashes against the roof, but in here we are safe and dry. I noticed a draft coming from the lower stacks and found a window latch that had worked loose. I secured it, and the whistling wind ceased. I spent the rest of the day repairing a damaged book. It was a collection of poetry, the spine peeling away from the cover. I prepared the glue, heating it gently over a small flame until it was the consistency of honey. I applied it with a small brush, pressing the binding back into place. It requires patience and a steady hand. The smell of the warm glue mixed with the smell of old leather is oddly comforting. I placed the book in the press to dry overnight. It will be whole again tomorrow. November 18th, 1898. The atmosphere in the library was particularly heavy today, perhaps due to the low pressure of the storm outside. The gas lamps flickered occasionally. I spent hours in the archives, sorting through a box of uncatalogued letters from the previous century. They are fragile, tied together with faded red ribbon. I handled them with white cotton gloves to protect the ink. Reading fragments of lives long gone, a mother writing to her son, a merchant listing his goods. It feels like whispering with ghosts. The silence of the archive is deep, almost physical. It wraps around you like a heavy wool blanket. At 4 p.m., I stopped for tea. The china cup felt warm in my hands. I watched the steam rise and disappear into the shadows of the ceiling.
November 19th, 1898. The storm has finally broken. I unlocked the doors this morning to a pale, watery sunlight streaming through the high clerestory windows. The light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, turning them into suspended gold. It is Saturday, and the library closes early at noon. I spent the morning polishing the oak banisters of the spiral staircase. I used a tin of beeswax and a soft flannel cloth. The repetitive motion is soothing, rubbing the wax in small circles until the wood gleams. The smell of the beeswax is rich and earthy. It mingled with the scent of old leather bindings. By 11 a.m., the library was empty, save for a young student studying Latin in the corner. The silence was absolute, broken only by the turning of his pages. November 20th, 1898. Sunday. The library is closed to the public, but I came in briefly after church to tend to the furnace. The boiler in the basement requires banking so the pipes do not freeze over the weekend. The building feels different when it is truly empty. It is a hollow, echoing space. I walked through the main reading room, my footsteps sounding loud on the wooden floorboards. I stopped at the philosophy section and straightened a row of books that were leaning slightly. Even on my day of rest, I cannot abide disorder. I checked the temperature gauge. It read 55 degrees. Cool, but safe for the manuscripts. I left by the side door, locking it securely against the cold wind. November 21st, 1898. Monday brings the routine back. A delivery of supplies arrived at 8 a.m., 2 crates of coal for the fire, and a box of stationery. I spent the first hour filling the inkwells at the writing desks. I poured the black India ink from a large glass bottle. One must be very steady. A single drop could stain the green baize of the desks. The smell of the ink is sharp and chemical, a contrast to the musty sweetness of the books. Later, I updated the catalog cards for the new history acquisitions. The cards are stiff and white. I write the author's name, the title, and the shelf mark in my best copperplate script. Gibbon, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Shelf 4B. It is satisfying to see the cards filed away in their wooden drawers, perfectly alphabetical. November 22nd, 1898. A heavy frost covered London this morning. The windows of the library were patterned with ice ferns, intricate and beautiful. I had to scrape a small peephole to see the street outside. Inside, it was chilly. I stoked the fire in the reading room fireplace early, piling the coal high. The flames crackled and popped, sending waves of warmth into the room. A few patrons came in simply to warm their hands, pretending to browse the periodicals. I do not mind. The library is a sanctuary for the body as well as the mind. I spent the afternoon in the genealogy section, helping a woman trace her family tree. We searched through parish records for hours. The sound of the fire and the rustling of heavy parchment were the only noises. November 24th, 1898. A heavy frost covered London this morning. The windows of the library were patterned with ice ferns, intricate and beautiful. I had to scrape a small peephole to see the street outside. Inside, it was chilly. I stoked the fire in the reading room fireplace early, piling the coal high. The flames crackled and popped, sending waves of warmth into the room. A few patrons came in simply to warm their hands, pretending to browse the periodicals. I do not mind. The library is a sanctuary for the body as well as the mind. I spent the afternoon in the genealogy section, helping a woman trace her family tree. We searched through parish records for hours. The sound of the fire and the rustling of heavy parchment were the only noises. November 25th, 1898. The temperature has dropped further. The pipes groaned and clanked this morning as the heat rose through the building.
It is the music of the library waking up. I spent the morning shelving returns. A stack of 20 books had accumulated on the front desk. Walking through the stacks is my favorite activity. I know the location of every volume by heart. Fiction on the left, sciences on the right. As I walked down the long aisle of the theology section, I ran my hand along the spines of the books. Rough cloth, smooth leather, raised ridges. It is a tactile landscape. I placed a volume of sermons back into its slot. It slid in with a soft shh sound, like a sigh of relief.
November 26th, 1898. Saturday. The week concludes with a gray, slate-colored sky. I spent the morning performing the weekly maintenance of the writing instruments. I collected all the dip pens from the reading desks. The nibs were clogged with dried ink. I soaked them in a bowl of warm water and vinegar. Watching the black ink swirl and dissolve into the water is strangely hypnotic, like smoke in the wind. I dried each nib with a soft cloth and replaced the ones that were bent or scratched. A smooth pen is essential for clear thought. By noon, the desks were reset, ready for next week's scholars. The library closes early today. I locked the doors at 1 p.m. and walked home through the drizzle, looking forward to my own armchair and a pot of tea. November 28th, 1898. Monday. The library smelled of damp wool and wet umbrellas this morning. It is a distinctive scent of London in the winter. I spent the first hour tending to the cloakroom, ensuring the patrons' coats were hung near the radiator to dry. Steam rose gently from the heavy fabrics. Later, I returned to the archives to continue sorting the estate papers of Lord Harrington. I discovered a small leather pouch tucked behind a stack of ledgers. Inside was a pair of silver reading spectacles, tarnished with age. I polished them with my handkerchief until they shone. It is a small artifact of a life, lost and found in the silence of this room. I placed them on my desk, a temporary companion. November 29th, 1898. I was shelving books in the poetry section when I made a discovery. Inside a volume of Keats, pressed between the pages of Ode to a Nightingale, was a dried flower, a violet, flattened and faded to a pale purple, almost gray. It must have been placed there decades ago. The paper around it was stained with a faint outline of the petals. I did not remove it. It belongs to the book now, a secret memory between the poet and the reader. I closed the book gently, careful not to disturb the fragile bloom, and slid it back onto the shelf. The library is full of such ghosts, tiny fragments of the people who held these books before me. November 30th, 1898. The last day of November. The month has passed in a blur of rain and ink. I spent the entire day at the main desk compiling the monthly usage statistics. I enjoy the columns of numbers, the tallying of borrowers, the accounting of fines. There is a clean logic to it. We had 400 visitors this month. 12 books were repaired, 3 were lost. I entered these figures into the grand ledger. The scratching of my pen and the ticking of the grandfather clock were the only sounds. Outside, the wind is picking up, stripping the last dead leaves from the trees in the square. Winter is fully upon us now. December 1st, 1898. December has arrived with a biting frost. The windows were frozen shut this morning. I had to force the latch to open them a crack for ventilation. The air that rushed in was sharp and cold, smelling of chimney smoke. I lit the fire in the reading room an hour early to chase away the chill. The flames leapt up the chimney, casting a warm orange glow across the wooden floor. I spent the morning arranging a display of holiday-themed manuscripts, old carols, and illuminated texts of the Nativity.
The gold leaf on the parchment catches the firelight, shimmering in the dim room. It feels festive, in a quiet, solemn way. December 2nd, 1898. A quiet Friday. The cold keeps many people away. The library feels like a fortress against the weather. I spent the afternoon in the biography section. I enjoy the smell of this aisle. It smells richer, deeper, like tobacco and old leather chairs. I found a loose board in the floor near the window and marked it for the carpenter. Then I sat for a moment on the step stool, listening. The library breathes. You can hear the settling of the wood, the rustle of paper, the distant hum of the gas pipes. It is a living thing. I feel safe here, surrounded by millions of words that do not demand to be spoken. December 3rd, 1898. Saturday again. The cycle repeats. I dusted the tops of the tall bookcases today, using the long ladder. From up there, near the ceiling, the library looks like a maze of wood and paper. I could see the tops of the patrons' heads bowed over their studies. They looked peaceful. I wiped the dust from the cornices, moving slowly. Dust is the constant enemy, but removing it is a meditative act. It returns, and I remove it, a gentle battle. I finished by noon and descended the ladder. My muscles felt used and warm. I locked the heavy doors with a sense of accomplishment. Another week secured in the archives.
December 5th, 1898, Monday. A heavy snowfall began in the night and continued well into the morning. London is silenced. The usual clatter of carriage wheels and horses' hooves on the cobblestones is gone, muffled by a thick blanket of white. Inside the library, the silence is even deeper. I spent the morning in the reading alcoves, dusting the velvet cushions of the armchairs. The dust danced in the pale winter light. I paused to watch the snow falling past the window, large, soft flakes drifting endlessly. It is mesmerizing. I felt no need to rush today. The few patrons who braved the weather spoke in whispers, as if afraid to disturb the peace of the snow. December 6th, 1898. The cold is penetrating today. The thermometer inside the main hall read only 50 degrees. I wore my fingerless wool gloves while working at the catalogue desk. I spent the day updating the index for the natural history collection. I enjoy the illustrations in these old volumes, drawings of birds, beetles, and ferns, rendered in meticulous detail. I found a plate of a tropical parrot, its feathers painted in brilliant scarlet and blue. It seemed almost alive against the gray backdrop of the day. I stared at it for a long time, imagining the warmth of a jungle before turning the page and returning to the cold reality of London. December 7th, 1898, Wednesday. The grandfather clock in the foyer stopped at 10:15 a.m. The sudden absence of its ticking was startling. It felt as though the heart of the building had stopped beating. I fetched the winding key from the office. It is a heavy brass key, cool to the touch. I opened the glass face of the clock and inserted the key. Click, click, click. I wound the weights slowly, feeling the tension build in the spring. Then I gave the pendulum a gentle push. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The rhythm returned. Time resumed its slow march. I stood there for a few minutes, just listening to the steady, reassuring beat. December 8th, 1898. The days are growing incredibly short. Twilight fell at 3:30 p.m. today. I spent the afternoon lighting the lamps early. I moved from table to table with my taper, igniting the gas mantles. Each one flared into life with a soft pop, casting a pool of warm yellow light onto the green baize surfaces of the desks.
The library looks its best in this artificial light, shadows clinging to the corners, the gold lettering on the book spines glinting in the gloom. It feels like a secret world hidden away from the darkness outside. I sat at my desk and simply breathed in the smell of the room, old paper, coal smoke, and the faint, sweet scent of decaying leather. December 9th, 1898. A quiet Friday. I spent the entire day in the stacks, shelving a large return of encyclopedias. They are heavy, bound in dark blue cloth. The physical exertion was welcome. It kept the blood moving. I enjoy the sound of a book sliding into a tight space on a shelf, the friction of cloth against cloth, then the final soft thud as it settles into place. It is a sound of completion, order restored. While shelving, I noticed a young woman reading near the window. She had fallen asleep, her head resting on an open volume of poetry. I did not wake her. The library is a place for dreams, after all. December 10th, 1898. Saturday. The week ends with a thaw. The snow is melting, turning into grey slush on the streets, but inside it remains dry and constant. I spent the morning repairing a torn map of the British Isles. The tear ran right through the coastline of Scotland. I used a thin strip of Japanese tissue paper and wheat starch paste to bridge the gap. It is delicate work, requiring a steady hand and held breath. When it dried, the tear was almost invisible. The land was whole again. I locked the doors at 1 p.m. As I walked away, I looked back at the building. It stood silent and imposing, guarding its millions of words against the damp and the cold. December 11th, 1898. Sunday. I came in briefly to check the coal cellar. We are using a great deal of fuel this month. The cellar is dark and smells of earth and carbon. I shoveled enough coal into the scuttles to last through Monday morning. The scrape of the shovel against the stone floor was loud in the empty building. Before leaving, I went up to the main hall. It was completely dark, save for the grey light filtering through the high windows. The rows of books looked like sleeping soldiers. I whispered, "Good night," to the empty room. It seemed the polite thing to do. December 12th, 1898. Monday. A delivery of new leather arrived for the bindery. The smell of fresh calfskin is pungent and rich. I spent the morning cutting the leather into strips for spine repairs. My knife is sharp. It slices through the material with a satisfying shh sound. I worked in silence, enjoying the precision of the task. In the afternoon, the fog lifted, revealing a weak, pale sun. I took a moment to water the ferns in the entrance hall. They are the only green things left in this winter world. They drink the water greedily. I wiped a speck of dust from a frond. Everything here must be perfect. December 13th, 1898. The library was nearly empty today. The city is busy with holiday preparations, leaving this place to the ghosts and the scholars. I spent the day in the philosophy section, straightening the shelves. I found a volume of Marcus Aurelius that had been shelved upside down. I righted it. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. I read that line standing in the aisle, surrounded by dust motes dancing in the gaslight. The words felt heavy and true. I placed the book back. It made a soft thud, a period at the end of a sentence. December 14th, 1898. It is bitterly cold. The windows are frosted over completely, blocking out the street. We are sealed in. I spent the afternoon checking the gas pipes. The pressure is steady.
The hiss of the gas is the only sound in the room, a constant white noise that masks the silence. I sat at the main desk and sharpened all the pencils, creating a pile of cedar shavings. The smell of the wood is clean and sharp. I blew the shavings into the waste bin. It is a small task, but it marks the passage of time. Tick, tock, sharpen, write. December 15th, 1898. A solitary bird, a sparrow, somehow found its way into the main hall. It fluttered high up near the vaulted ceiling, confused by the space. I opened the upper windows with the long pole. It took an hour, but finally it found the draft and flew out into the cold gray sky. I watched it go. Part of me wished it had stayed. It was a spark of chaotic life in this ordered tomb of paper. I closed the window. The silence rushed back in, filling the space instantly. I returned to my ledger. The numbers do not fly away. December 16th, 1898. The year is winding down. The light is failing. I have reached the last few pages of this journal. The paper is smooth under my hand, waiting for the final words. I look around the library. Thousands of books, millions of lives trapped in ink, waiting to be read. They are safe here. I am their guardian. The fire is dying down in the grate, turning to glowing embers. It is time to close the book. The archive is silent, the world is asleep, and so am I. The librarian closes the heavy book. The ink is dry. The gas lamps are lowered, one by one, until only the shadows remain. Thank you for wandering the aisles of the past with us. The library is closed now. The stories are safe. Let the silence wrap around you like a warm blanket. Sleep well.